This is a WKYT podcast.
Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Later, we're going to be hearing from U.S. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell on the federal response to COVID-19, including help for businesses and hospitals. That's coming later. But first, Kentucky's Interim Education Commissioner Kevin Brown is with us. Brown is an attorney who has long worked in education and who was selected to run the Department of Education while the search continues for a permanent commissioner. But Brown could never have imagined that he would be leading Kentucky schools during such a historic time and having to make decisions that have impacted every student and teacher in the Commonwealth. The coronavirus pandemic forced schools to close to in-classroom instruction. It also meant the sudden end of athletic seasons, no proms, the cancellation of school trips and graduations, and yet schools and students have made the best of the adversity. Interim Education Commissioner Kevin Brown joining us remotely today, and we want to thank him very much for taking time to be with us. Thanks for being on with us, Commissioner. As we said,
Thank you for having us.
There is no way that you could have imagined a time like this when you agreed that, you would run the State Department of Education for a few months, as you did before, back 2015 or so. What have these recent weeks been like in terms of decisions that have had to be made, knowing they're historic in the middle of this pandemic?
I must say, and to be honest, it's been very stressful. At the same time, we're very blessed in Kentucky to have an amazing, I call it the K-12 education family. And of course, as a Kentuckian, I believe we do it better than any other state in the country. And I'm not talking necessarily about us or me, but I'm talking about our folks on the ground in our school districts, our superintendents, our teachers, support staff. From day one, they've been amazing. They have responded. They've done everything we've asked them to do. And then also we have a great team assembled at the Department of Education, a lot of long-serving members that are employees that have been there numerous years, some of them over 20 years, just dedicated to public education. And then the communication between the governor's office, public health, the Department of Education has been great. And so that's really assisted me in doing this. And I like to say all the hard work, of course, is occurring on the front lines, feeding kids, educating kids. And you've heard the governor say, and we've said it a lot, that school buildings are closed, but schools have still been open. And that's been an amazing story, and it will be, I think, as history writes this period, will show some amazing things that happened.
Some schools were ready for non-traditional instruction or NTI, and some had to quickly set up for it and to submit some plans to you and get their plan in place. Scott County Superintendent Kevin Hubb has readily acknowledged that it is not as good as in-class instruction. Fayette County pulled back on assignments because the leaders there thought it was causing too much stress for students and teachers and parents, for that matter. Do you agree this has been a tremendous challenge to finish this year up online?
It has been a challenge. It is exhausting on everyone involved, students, teachers, families and parents trying to also be on the front lines in their various work, and nurses and folks that are farming and doing other things, but also trying to come in and help their students with activities. It's a different kind of learning. There are things we can't do with NTI, obviously, that we can do in a normal school day when we have students sitting there. On the other hand, it does help us reduce education loss. And we have a 93% student participation rate right now on the NTI program as it has existed since around March 16th. And we get that data from teachers that submit the data to the department, and that's showing that they've had contact with 93% of their students using technology or packets on a daily basis. Now we want that to be 100%, but 93% in this type of an unprecedented time is very good, and my hat is off to the school principals and teachers that are making that happen.
Well, given what has happened, do you think these students will be at some disadvantage going forward, or is it in some way, strangely, an advantage that they have had to innovate and they've learned something about the sacrifice that has been needed to be made in this situation?
I think it's going to be a little bit of both. A disengaged student in a traditional classroom on a normal day is likely to be a disengaged student using non-traditional instruction. However, we also know that teachers are reaching out to students in a way that they may not have done on a traditional class day. They're calling students, they're calling parents, they're using email, they're using various education platforms to reach out to students. So there could be some cases where we're actually having some more contact with a student, and we've heard some anecdotal stories about how teachers and staff that are so eager to communicate with parents that some parents were being overloaded by all the calls from their school, and so schools have learned how to better manage that. That was a nice problem to have, though. It just shows you the effort that's going into it. And I also think you can just look on social media and spend 5 minutes and you can see some of the creative things that are happening. Students are working together in teams using the Google Meets or Microsoft Teams to meet with each other as they might do or talk to each other in the cafeteria on a normal day, and they're producing videos and working on projects, and so there are some success stories with it as well.
This NTI was somewhat experimental, considered to be a pilot program by some of the counties and independent districts that tried it out. But does this show that it has a real role going forward, and that Kentucky at least needs to have this as a backup in an unforeseen circumstance?
Absolutely, Bill. And as you mentioned a few minutes ago, we only had 83 of our districts, which that's a significant number, not quite half, but 83 of our districts are around March 1st were non-traditional instruction districts that were using that on a traditional snow day or flu day, which now sounds very quaint. And then almost overnight, by around March 20th, we had all 172 school districts approved to use non-traditional instruction, and then also many of those districts had not participated in the summer feeding program. And the summer feeding program, even though it's not summer, that's the federal program we're using right now to feed kids. Mm-hmm. And all districts in some form or fashion are now feeding kids. So you had some districts who had never participated in non-traditional instruction, never participated in summer feeding, and within 2 to 3 days, they were educating kids using NTI, and they were feeding kids. So we have 2,000 feeding sites around the state that are staffed by public school districts, and I received some information a few days ago. We have statistics on that. We've fed 4.6 meals in the month of March to 230,000 students. It's amazing.
Commissioner Brown, some parts of the school experience cannot be reclaimed. The trips, the proms, the athletic seasons, the traditional graduation. Do you have empathy for those students who have missed out on some of those memorable moments?
We do. We knew that this day might come. The governor, as everyone knows, is using data to inform these decisions and recommendations. And so we were informing and meeting with school superintendents on a 2 to 3 week period, every 2 to 3 weeks, to inform them. And there was a glimmer of hope as recently as 2 weeks ago when the governor met with superintendents to say that there was a possibility to return to in-person classes. And I think that was true at that time. There was a hope. But when you start looking at the various phases that the White House wants states to use, which we're using, the phases of reopening, when you lay that over a school calendar, there's just no way that we could have an in-person graduation or prom or other activities, and it's heartbreaking. And so, of course, that was part of the governor's communication to school districts this week, that we had to come to that decision, and then we needed that decision now so we could start planning. But we're already seeing some innovative ideas about how schools could do drive-in or drive-through or drive-up. I've heard it described various ways. Graduation ceremony, similar to how our churches or many churches are having those types of events on Sundays, but using the social distancing and the rules and protocols put in place by Department of Public Health. And so it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult for the students that are looking forward to this. And I have a student advisory group I met with that advisory group. That was the first advisory group I met with. Not that the other advisories are less important, but I wanted to hear from students when this first started. And they were sad about graduation and prom possibility being canceled, but they were also sad about some of the smaller events that you would not think about being causing disappointment, such as going back to their elementary and middle school, which is a tradition in some school districts to walk the halls and talk to the teachers before they graduate. Some classes have senior breakfasts. They are actually mourning the loss of those types of events, but we're encouraging districts to be as creative as possible and using virtual technology. I know that the Lieutenant Governor and I are talking about, is there some kind of a way that on a statewide basis we can honor our class of 2020 in some way, and we're discussing if that's feasible.
I just get a feeling that they're going to be welcome in those elementary schools and other places that they go for the sacrifice that they've given and what they've done this year going forward. You have said that you are not, Mr. Brown, a candidate for the job of Education Commissioner permanently. You have stepped in. I'm sure that the role may take longer now because of the events than you previously had anticipated. Given your experience and given this situation that we've now been through, do you continue to take that stance? You do not want this job permanently, and what do you think the next commissioner needs to have in terms of qualities?
That is true, Bill. I'm not a candidate, and actually when Chair David Karam called me to ask to see if I would be interested in being the interim commissioner again, I said I would do it on under two conditions. One, you would have to announce publicly that I would not be considered a candidate for the permanent position, and then two, it would need to be through an MOA through Jefferson County Schools. I'm on leave through that MOA as their general counsel. I left the Department of Education in 2018 to be their general counsel, and so they agreed to that. And my personal opinion is I think it's important when individuals are filling interim positions that they focus on being the interim. And I did not want to be distracted about having to apply or run for another position. And that's proved to be a wise decision, because I needed all the attention from the interim right now needs to be on this. And we have a motto at the department that we started using in mid-March that we're focusing our efforts on educating, feeding, and supporting school districts so they can do the same for students. And so I think that's important. Kentucky has had a history of doing a national search for commissioners of education. We've had some very talented candidates and commissioners over the years, and that's exactly what this board is doing. The search is now underway. You'll be seeing some announcements from the search firm here in a few days with the actual announcement of the position and the characteristics and qualifications. And while it's not legally a requirement that the commissioner have classroom experience, I think that's an important part of a commissioner. My personal opinion again, and I don't have classroom experience other than being in a classroom as we all have for all those years. So I'm glad to serve in this capacity, and Kentucky has a national reputation. If you go to any meetings around the country with other states, Kentucky still is seen as a leader in education and innovation and reform. And so I think we're going to have a long list of folks that will apply or be nominated to be commissioner from inside Kentucky, but also around the country. And that says a lot about Kentucky.
So I think it will be an attractive job for somebody to come and take that position. Thank you so much for being with us, Commissioner Kevin Brown, who is serving as the Interim Commissioner of Kentucky Education right now at this very historic time. Again, could never have imagined that we would have to be in the situation we're in, but we do appreciate you taking some time to be with us. And we hope you'll stay with us on Kentucky Newsmakers. We're going to be catching up with U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell, a call from Washington, and that is ahead on Kentucky Newsmakers. And welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers. The federal government has responded to the COVID-19 pandemic with a stimulus package and some other aid. And I had a chance to talk with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky about what he is hoping to see next. All right, U.S. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Kentucky's longest-serving senator ever, is joining us on the phone. We really appreciate that. I know it's a very busy time in Washington. Senator, first, a little perspective. You've seen a lot in about 36 years there in the Senate in Washington. Is this the biggest challenge that you think America has faced in your long tenure there?
Yeah, I think so. I think the impact of this is much more widespread than the impact after 9/11 or after the financial meltdown in 2008. And the way forward is a little more than murky because of our inability so far to have adequate testing so we can be certain that people are not going to be exposed to somebody next to them who may be asymptomatic but still carry the virus. We don't yet have a proven treatment, and we don't yet have a vaccine. But having said all that, as the governor in our state indicated yesterday, it looks to me like in most states we've either plateaued or we're beginning to head in the other direction. And at this level of government, what we've been doing is borrowing a lot of money.
Yeah.
We passed another bill yesterday about $500 billion.
Give us some details about that. I know that it deals mainly with this phase with small businesses and also with hospitals. So tell us what that bill does that made its way through the Senate.
Well, about 12 days ago, the popular small business program ran out of money, and I've been trying to get cleared in the Senate a plus-up of that. Finally, yesterday, we were able to move that bill with over $300 billion to plus up the small business plan that was in great demand. These are basically forgivable loans, provided you hold on to your employees. Also, the hospitals are desperate, and we provided another $75 billion for hospitals. We had done roughly 100 in the first bill, the $2.2 trillion bill that we did several weeks ago, and $25 billion for testing. What does that mean to Kentucky hospitals? I've been talking to hospital administrators all over the state. Some have significant COVID-19 cases. Some of them have almost none. And the biggest problem the hospitals have at the moment is they can't do elective surgery. So I would urge the governor, this is a governor decision, both to open the economy and to allow elective surgery. I'd urge the governor to take a look at ending the ban on elective surgery, because that's where the hospitals make money. They don't make any money off of Medicare and Medicaid, and they're all bleeding. And so there are two things that need to happen. Number one, we send additional money, which we've done again yesterday. And number two, they need to be able to engage in elective surgery. Again, that's a state decision. Opening the economy is also a state decision, and I know the governor is looking toward beginning that process. And hopefully he'll take a look at the regions of Kentucky that are less impacted and begin to let them begin to open up. I would say this cautionary, though, Bill.
Yeah.
As we open up, people need to as they've listened to Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, practice social distancing and don't be stigmatized by wearing a mask. It doesn't necessarily mean you're sick. It means you're concerned about others. And so we need to change our habits here for the short term, even as the economy opens up.
Senator, states are at tremendous costs for unemployment. We know that there will be requests for federal aid there. We know that our city and county governments also face huge budget deficits right now. Many are indicating to us that they are going to be requesting federal aid. Will more be forthcoming? Do you think there will be a need that there be more stimulus from Washington?
Yeah, here's my view of additional assistance to states and local governments. We've now borrowed $2.7 trillion in a little over a month. I don't think we should take the next step until we've taken a look at the impact of this on the country's future. And number two, I'm not interested in borrowing money from future generations to solve state pension problems that they've created for themselves over the years, as one example. So I think whatever additional assistance we provide to state and local governments, if and when we do, ought to clearly be related to the coronavirus issue. In other words, we're not going to borrow for future generations to solve problems that pre-existed the pandemic that were not solved by various state and local governments across America.
There was money in the original bill to help universities and their students, and I know you are a graduate of both UK and U of L, and both of those this week have announced major shortfalls in the tens of millions of dollars going forward. Do you think that the federal government has done enough to assist these public universities that are also in many cases research facilities, and in the case of regional universities, very important to their areas of the state?
Yeah, I don't know whether we've done enough or not, but already $156 million, $17 million for UK, $10 million for Eastern, hundreds of thousands for Center and Transylvania, and that's to be emergency aid to be used by the students. So, yes, there is money previously appropriated to try to help the students as well and the universities try to make it through this pandemic.
I know that nobody knows how long this is going to take. Nobody knows if there may be a second wave. Nobody knows if we can get back to having crowds at events by the time late summer and fall comes around. But how will we know, Senator, from your vantage point, that we are making progress in both dealing with COVID-19 and in restoring our economy?
I think the $25 billion that we passed in the Senate yesterday for testing is the key to getting back to normal. We're going to have to test a significant number of people all across America. Or, Bill, just a governor deciding the economy's open doesn't mean people are going to re-engage in the economy if they're fearful. Right. So I think we have to get a handle on testing. Hopefully, in the short term here, we'll be able to come up with a treatment. Some of the treatments that are being experimented with seem to work. A vaccine, we think, is going to take a little longer. But testing in the short term, I think, is how you reassure people I can go back to work, because we've all been tested, for example, and I know the person next to me is not a carrier. And so we were basically doing testing on kind of a Manhattan project basis. In other words, all in on testing with the $25 billion that cleared the Senate yesterday and will clear the House tomorrow.
Well, it has come at us fast, and I know that we're all dealing with it in many ways, and from whatever perspective or role we play in society. Thank you so much, Senator McConnell, for joining us. Let me, one other quick thing. You are subject to election this year, the May primary, and you're hoping to get through that and be the Republican nominee for November. Are you comfortable with Kentucky holding a primary election on June 23rd in a traditional way?
Yeah, I think so. I think the Secretary of State and the governor, I'm told, have worked out a way to where more people can vote by absentee by using, apparently, the rationale of the coronavirus. I think that's fine. That'll still be a conventional election, and those decisions need to be made at the state level, and I'm comfortable with the decision Secretary of State Mike Adams might make about that.
Senator McConnell, thank you for being with us. And stay with us on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Our national political analyst, Greta Van Susteren, will look back at this historic week when we come right back. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers. President Trump makes some temporary changes to immigration policy to fight COVID-19. And our national political analyst takes a look.
Hello, I'm Greta Van Susteren, and here is your full court fast break. The coronavirus continues to have the nation in a giant state of pause, but some states slowly beginning to open. Fingers crossed it's the right plan for the right time. Plus, President Trump signing an executive order, a 60-day freeze on new green cards. The president's executive order does not impact guest workers. He's leaving that alone after an uproar from business groups. The president arguing his immigration executive order protects American jobs hard hit by the pandemic. Democrats not agreeing, calling the move a distraction and one that reignites the president's base a few months before Election Day. Meanwhile, the U.S. deporting migrants with COVID-19 back to Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. According to the Washington Post, at least 50 deportees in Guatemala tested positive. Now that makes up roughly 15% of the country's confirmed cases. Mexico is asking the U.S. to test deportees before transporting them. The U.S. not complying. ICE says migrants are screened and detainees with a fever are referred to a medical provider. But as you know, you can be asymptomatic and still carry the virus. Now an update in testing. For the first time, the FDA authorizing at-home coronavirus tests, specifically those tests made by LabCorp. The FDA commissioner says these kits are safe, accurate, and could boost testing rates. The general public will eventually have access to an online survey. Participants with symptoms meeting FDA guidelines will buy a test, swab their noses, and mail the kits back. Healthcare and emergency workers, they will get first dibs. In the coming weeks, the kits will be available to consumers. Want more Full Court Press? Tune in Sunday. We bring politics home, covering the national stories that impact you.
And a reminder, you can catch Full Court Press with Greta Van Susteren this morning at 11:30 on WKYT. And that is Kentucky Newsmakers. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you this week on WKYT This Morning. We hope you make it a good week ahead.